The massive crystal dome stretched across the sky like a frozen ocean wave, its transparent walls revealing the swirling purple atmosphere of Altara Prime beyond. Inside this architectural marvel, beings from across the galaxy had gathered for what many considered the most important event of the cycle, the Great Assessment. The air hummed with translated conversations in dozens of languages as representatives took their assigned positions in the amphitheater. Ambassador David Walsh adjusted his simple black suit and looked around at the assembled delegates. To his left sat the Lumina representative, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field that hurt to look at directly. The creature's thoughts leaked into the surrounding space as visible aura patterns that danced across the crystal walls. On his right, the insectoid queen of the Hive Collective clicked her mandibles in what passed for polite conversation with a synthetic delegate whose chrome body reflected the chamber's ethereal lighting. High Chancellor Kethva of the Alterans called the assembly to order. The crystalline being's voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, yet every word carried the weight of absolute authority. We gather today to assess the contributions and capabilities of each member species in our great federation. Let us begin with those who have shown the greatest advancement in the past cycle. The first holographic display materialized in the center of the amphitheater, showing the Lumina civilization in all its glory. Energy beings danced between stars, manipulating matter at the quantum level with casual ease. They built structures from compressed light and traveled instantly across vast distances by riding cosmic radiation waves. The display showed their latest achievement, converting an entire solar system into pure energy and storing it within a space no larger than a marble. The Lumina continued to exceed all expectations, Kethva announced as murmurs of appreciation filled the chamber. Their mastery over the fundamental forces of reality grows with each passing year. The Hive Collective's presentation followed, displaying swarms of billions working in perfect coordination. Their biotechnology had reached levels that made them capable of growing entire spaceships from modified genetic templates. Planets covered in living cities pulsed with organic machinery that could adapt and evolve in real time. The Queen's mandibles clicked with pride as the hologram showed their latest creation, a moon-sized organism that could process raw stellar matter into any desired element, the synthetics. Demonstration focused on computational power and manufacturing precision. Their mechanical worlds produced technology with atomic-level accuracy at incredible speeds. Massive server complexes that spanned continents processed information faster than most species could think. They had recently achieved the ability to simulate entire universes within their quantum processing cores. Complete with functioning laws of physics and emerging life forms, species after species presented their achievements. The Psychic Mentari showed their ability to link minds across galactic distances. The energy-harvesting Solarians demonstrated how they could drink directly from stellar cores. The shape-shifting Flux displayed their mastery over molecular structure, transforming into any form of matter at will. Then came humanity's turn. David Walsh stood as the holographic display shifted to show Earth and its modest collection of colonies. The presentation began with humanity's greatest technological achievements: fusion reactors, quantum computers, and faster-than-light travel that barely managed 1/10 the speed of most Federation vessels. The display showed human cities, impressive by Earth standards but looking primitive compared to the living metropolises of the Hive or the pure energy constructs of the Lumina. A ripple of what David could only describe as polite confusion spread through the chamber. The synthetic delegates' optical sensors focused on the human display with mechanical precision, as if trying to detect some hidden feature that justified humanity's presence among these galactic powers. The Lumina representative's energy field flickered in patterns that David's translator rendered as mild bewilderment. Humans possess no natural energy projection capabilities. Kethva's voice carried a note of careful diplomacy. Their telepathic abilities are virtually non-existent. Physical strength remains within biological norms. Their technology, while functional, operates on principles most of our members mastered centuries ago. The Hive Queen's clicking grew more Rapid, which David's cultural briefings had taught him indicated either excitement or amusement. Their weapons still rely on crude nuclear fusion, she observed. Quite charming in its simplicity. Perhaps they excel in some other area? Suggested one of the Flux representatives, their form shifting between various geometric shapes as they spoke. Hidden talents that are not immediately apparent? The holographic display continued, showing humanity's achievements in art, literature, and cultural development. While impressive to human eyes, these accomplishments seemed to generate even more confusion among the assembled delegates. The Mentari representative, whose species had been creating psychic symphonies that spanned star systems for millennia, observed humanity's music with what appeared to be anthropological interest rather than recognition of peer achievement. Their primary distinguishing trait appears to be an unusual degree of persistence. Noted the Lumina delegate, their energy patterns shifting to colors that David's translator interpreted as condescending amusement. They continue attempting tasks. Long after logical analysis would suggest abandonment of the effort. Persistence can be valuable, Kethva acknowledged diplomatically, in certain limited applications. The assessment continued with clinical precision. Human lifespan, average for biological entities. Human learning capacity, adequate but not. Exceptional. Human adaptability, moderate. Though they seemed unusually willing to attempt survival in hostile environments that other species would simply avoid. Human social structure, complex but inefficient, lacking the perfect coordination of the hive, or the logical hierarchies of the synthetics. David felt the weight of the galaxy's judgment settling on his shoulders as delegate after delegate offered their observations. The Solarians wondered if humans might serve better as a client species, protected and guided by more advanced civilizations. The Flux suggested that humanity's real value might lie in their biological diversity, making them suitable for terraforming projects in environments too harsh for more sophisticated species. I propose we classify them under minor powers, announced the synthetic delegate with mechanical certainty. Their contributions could be optimized through integration with more advanced technological frameworks. The vote proceeded with the inevitability of gravity. Species after species agreed that humanity belonged in the minor powers category, suitable for resource extraction and basic labor but not ready for the responsibilities of full Federation membership. David cast humanity's single vote against the motion, but it was like trying to stop a stellar wind with a sheet of paper dot as the session concluded, and delegates began filing out of the Crystal Dome. David overheard a group of young alien representatives near the exit. They were placing bets on how long it would take for humanity to accept their new status once they realized the benefits of client species protection. Their laughter, filtered through dozens of translation protocols, still managed to sound remarkably similar to the dismissive chuckles he remembered from school playgrounds. David gathered his materials and prepared to return to Earth with news that would disappoint billions. As he walked toward the transport bay, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just made a significant miscalculation, but he had no way of knowing just how significant that mistake would prove to be. Dr. Maria Santos pressed her face against the observation window of Research Station Neptune, watching the distant sun cast its weak light across the ice-covered surface of the solar system's outermost planet. The coffee in her hands had grown cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. For the past 3 weeks, her instruments had been detecting something that shouldn't exist, patterns in the cosmic background radiation that suggested intelligence. The patterns had started small, barely noticeable fluctuations that most scientists would have dismissed as equipment malfunction. But Maria had spent 15 years studying the universe's background hum, and she knew the difference between random noise and deliberate signal. These weren't random. They followed mathematical sequences that grew more complex each day, as if something vast and ancient was slowly remembering how to speak. "Dr. Santos, you need to see this," called Tom, her research assistant, from across the cramped observation deck. His voice carried an edge of panic that made Maria's stomach clench with worry. She floated over to his workstation in the station's low gravity, her coffee finally spilling as she pushed off from the window. The displays showed readings from deep space monitoring arrays across the galaxy, data shared through the Federation's scientific network. Every single station was reporting the same phenomenon. The patterns were everywhere, growing stronger by the hour. "It's not just our sector," Tom said, his hands shaking as he pulled up display after display. "The Lumina's quantum sensors in the Vega system are picking up the same signatures. The Hive's bioscanners near the galactic core are going crazy. Even the synthetics processing arrays are flagging these patterns as artificially created." Maria studied the data streams, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. The patterns weren't just mathematical, they were architectural. Hidden within the cosmic static were blueprints, design specifications for structures so massive they dwarfed entire star systems. More disturbing still, some of these blueprints corresponded to astronomical features that scientists had cataloged for centuries as natural phenomena. "Tom, pull up the survey data for the Horsehead Nebula," she said. Her voice barely above a whisper, the familiar image appeared on screen, a dark cloud of cosmic dust and gas, shaped vaguely like a horse's head against the bright background of surrounding stars. But when Tom overlaid the pattern data from the cosmic radiation, the nebula's true nature became horrifyingly clear. It wasn't a natural formation at all. It was a machine, dormant for so long that cosmic dust had settled across its surface like snow on a sleeping giant. Across the galaxy, similar revelations were occurring. The Ring Nebula wasn't a stellar death, it was technology. The Crab Nebulas. Pulsar wasn't a neutron star, it was a beacon. Structures that had been hiding in plain sight for millennia were beginning to wake up, their ancient systems coming online after eons of sleep. The first activation occurred in the Centauri system, where human colonists had established mining operations on several asteroids. The miners reported that their equipment was malfunctioning, detecting massive gravitational anomalies where none should exist. Then the reports stopped coming entirely. Federation response teams arrived to find the entire star system transformed. Where once there had been planets orbiting a binary star, now geometric structures of impossible size drifted in perfect formation. The miners were gone, their stations intact but empty. More disturbing still, their equipment showed no signs of struggle or violence. It was as if the population had simply vanished. The second activation followed within days. The Mentari's home system, with its billions of psychically linked inhabitants, went silent in the span of a single hour. Rescue vessels found the Mentari. Worlds intact but lifeless, their cities functioning normally but completely devoid of consciousness. The psychic network that had connected their entire species had been severed so completely that it left no trace of what had caused the disconnection. Panic spread through Federation space faster than their fastest ships could carry news. Advanced civilizations that had considered themselves the masters of their galaxy suddenly found themselves facing technology that operated beyond their understanding. The Lumina's energy manipulation proved useless against machines that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The synthetics' computational power crashed when trying to analyze geometries that folded through dimensions. Their mathematics couldn't describe. First contact came not through careful diplomatic channels but through terror. The entities responsible for the awakening structures appeared simultaneously above every major Federation world, their vessels defying easy description. They existed in multiple dimensions at once, their surfaces shifting through geometries that hurt to observe directly. Looking at them was like trying to focus on a shape that changed every time conscious thought tried to grasp it. The beings called themselves the architects, and their message was delivered not through words but through direct implantation of knowledge into every thinking mind within their influence. They spoke of creation and ownership, of seeds planted long ago that had grown beyond their intended purpose. The younger races, they claimed, had stolen energy that rightfully belonged to the builders of reality itself. The demonstration of their power was swift and absolute. On Altara Prime, where the Crystal Dome had recently hosted humanity's humiliation. The architect's technology began dismantling the planetary defense grid. Energy shields that could withstand stellar flares simply failed to interact with the architect's weapons. The crystalline beings that had built the galaxy's most beautiful cities watched helplessly as their creations were systematically deconstructed, but the architects weren't destroying for destruction's sake. They were harvesting something far more precious than materials or energy. As Federation worlds fell silent one by one, the horrifying pattern became clear. They were taking consciousness itself. Not killing their victims, but extracting the spark of awareness that made life more than mere biology. Entire populations remained physically intact but spiritually hollow. Their bodies functioning but their minds gone, the hive collective's billions became empty shells that continued their work with mechanical precision but no creativity or growth. The flux lost their ability to change shape, frozen in whatever form they had held when the harvest began. Even the energy-based Lumina dimmed to barely visible flickers, their consciousness torn away from the forces they had once commanded with godlike power. Maria watched the reports flood in from her station near Neptune, her hands trembling as she realized the scale of what was happening. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were falling like wheat before a cosmic harvester, their combined might proving irrelevant against enemies who had built the very stars around which their worlds orbited. Dr. Santos, Tom's voice was barely audible over the hum of the station's life support systems. There's something else. The patterns are changing again. They're getting stronger, more focused, and they're all pointing in the same direction. Maria looked at the data Tom was showing her, and her blood turned to ice. Every pattern, every signal from the awakening architect technology was converging on a single point in space. They were pointing toward Earth, toward humanity's modest collection of worlds that the galaxy had recently dismissed as irrelevant. The cosmic background radiation carried one final message, clear enough that even human technology could decode. The architects were coming for the species they had created long ago, the one experiment they had left unfinished. They were coming to complete their work on humanity, to harvest the consciousness they had seeded in human minds millions of years before. As Maria stared out at the stars, she realized that Earth's recent humiliation at the Federation Assembly had been the least of their problems. The galaxy's most advanced species had mocked humanity's weakness, but none of that would matter if the architects succeeded in their harvest. Soon there would be no consciousness left in the galaxy to mock. Anything at all. The morning sun rose over the Australian outback just as it had for millions of years, casting long shadows across the red earth and scattered rocks. But today was different. Today, something that had waited beneath the surface since before human civilization began was finally ready to reveal itself. Dr. James Mitchell knelt beside the ancient stone formation at Uluru. His archaeological equipment spread around him like the tools of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. For decades, researchers had wondered why certain Aboriginal communities spoke of the Great Rock as a sleeping giant, a being that would wake when the Sky People returned. Now, as energy readings spiked across his instruments, James was beginning to understand that their legends might have been more literal than anyone had imagined. The changes had started 3 days ago, when the architect construct arrived in Earth's solar system. Unlike the terrifying world killers that had devastated Federation space, this vessel was smaller, more elegant. It hung in Earth's sky like a crystal sculpture made of starlight, beautiful rather than threatening. But its presence had triggered responses across the planet that scientists were scrambling to understand. Ancient sites worldwide were awakening. Stonehenge hummed with energy that made nearby electronics malfunction. The pyramids of Giza emitted sounds that hurt human ears but somehow felt familiar to human minds. Göbekli Tepe's carved stones began glowing with patterns that matched the cosmic radiation signals Dr. Santos had detected from Neptune. Most disturbing of all, these sites seemed to be responding to human presence, growing more active when people approached them. Dr. Mitchell, you need to see this transmission, called Rebecca, his research partner, from their temporary command center. Her voice carried the same note of wonder and terror that had become common among scientists studying the global phenomenon. James reluctantly left the stone formation and walked to where Rebecca was monitoring communications equipment, borrowed from 3 different government agencies. On her screen was a message that had been transmitted directly to Earth from the Architect construct in orbit. But, unlike the crushing mental broadcasts that had devastated other worlds, this communication was different. It was asking for permission to land. "They want to talk," Rebecca said, her hands shaking as she adjusted the receiver settings. "Not conquer or harvest. They want to meet with human representatives at specific coordinates in Australia, England, Peru, and Egypt, all sites where we've been detecting the energy anomalies." The meeting took place at Uluru, chosen because it was the most isolated of the active sites and far from major population centers. James found himself part of a hastily assembled team of archaeologists, physicists, and government officials who would represent humanity in first contact with beings that had casually destroyed galactic civilizations. The architect representative that emerged from the descended craft was nothing like the multidimensional entities that had terrorized the galaxy. This being was humanoid in shape, though its skin seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as its ship. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in the minds of everyone present, but they felt familiar rather than invasive. "We are the Guardians," the being said, its mental voice carrying overtones of ancient sadness. "We oppose the awakening, the harvest that our kin have begun. We have come to offer you the truth about your species and a choice that will determine not only your survival, but the fate of all conscious life in this galaxy." The story the Guardian told was one that challenged everything humans thought they knew about their own origins. Millions of years ago, when Earth was still young and lifeless, the architects had seeded the galaxy with experiments in consciousness. Each species was designed for specific purposes: the Lumina to manipulate energy, the Hive to process information collectively, the synthetics to perfect mechanical precision, but humanity was different. The architects had created humans as a failsafe, a species designed not for any single capability but for adaptability itself. Human DNA contained dormant sequences that could be activated under extreme stress, allowing for rapid evolution at the biological and psychological level. More importantly, humans had been given something unique among the architect's creations: the ability to interface directly with architect technology. "Your persistence, which the galaxy mocks, is the key to everything," the Guardian explained. "Other species are perfected for their roles. They cannot change, cannot adapt beyond their design parameters, but humans were made to grow under pressure, to become whatever circumstances required. This is why you survived when others would have given up. This is why you can use our technology when others cannot." James felt his worldview crumbling as the Guardian continued its explanation. Human archaeological mysteries suddenly made sense when viewed as the remnants of architect installations. The strange mathematical insights that had led to human breakthroughs in physics and engineering weren't human discoveries at all. They were fragments of architect knowledge, slowly surfacing from genetic memory as humanity developed the capacity to understand them. "The reclaimers have returned to harvest what they consider their property," the Guardian said, its crystalline form shifting with what seemed like emotion. "They view consciousness as energy that belongs to them, stolen by species that were never meant to exist independently. They have already begun the harvest across the galaxy. Soon they will come for Earth." The choice the Guardian offered was terrible in its simplicity. Humanity could activate their dormant potential, accessing the architect technology hidden in ancient sites across Earth, but the activation process would only succeed for a tiny fraction of the human population. The rest would die as their neurology failed to adapt to the dimensional stresses of architect consciousness enhancement. "Even if we agree," asked General Harrison, the military representative on the contact team, "what makes you think humans can succeed where civilizations like the Lumina have failed?" The Guardian's response came with a demonstration. It activated a small device that projected a holographic maze, its passages shifting through dimensions that hurt to look at directly, Solve this, it said. It is a basic puzzle that every architect youth must complete. The assembled scientists and military officials stared at the maze in confusion. Its geometry defied human understanding, its paths folding through spaces that shouldn't exist. But James found himself approaching the hologram with growing confidence. The maze's structure wasn't completely alien, it reminded him of Aboriginal songline maps, of the way traditional stories describe journeys through landscapes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, working purely on instinct. James began manipulating the maze's controls. He couldn't explain why he pressed certain sections or rotated specific segments, but each action felt right in a way that bypassed rational thought. Within minutes, he had solved the puzzle that had stumped human science. "This is what we mean by genetic memory," the Guardian said, its mental voice filled with something that might have been approval. "Your species carries the patterns necessary to understand our technology, but they lie dormant until activated by necessity. The other species we created lack this flexibility. They cannot adapt their thinking to use tools they were not designed for." The demonstration continued with other team members. Rebecca solved a complex energy manipulation problem by thinking of it as a musical composition. General Harrison figured out a tactical scenario by treating it like a chess game played across multiple dimensions. Each human approached the architect challenges differently, but all found ways to succeed where traditional scientific analysis had failed. "The reclaimers are coming," the Guardian warned as its demonstration concluded. "They will arrive within days, expecting to find a helpless species ready for harvest. If you choose activation, many will die in the process. But those who survive will possess abilities that can challenge the reclaimers' technology. You will become what your species was always meant to be, the guardians of consciousness itself." As the Guardian's ship departed, leaving humanity to make their choice, James stood beside Uluru and felt the ancient stone humming with potential energy. Across the planet, similar sites were waiting for human decision. The galaxy had mocked humanity's weakness, dismissing them as insignificant. Soon they would discover whether that assessment had been accurate or whether humanity's greatest test was still to come. The choice would have to be made quickly. Deep space sensors were already detecting the approach of the reclaimer fleet, and Earth had perhaps days before the harvest began. Humanity would either evolve or perish, but they would not go quietly into extinction. The species that had surprised everyone with their unreasonable persistence was about to surprise them again. The queue stretched for kilometers across the Nebraska plains, a line of humanity that seemed to have no end. People from every continent had traveled to this remote location where an ancient architect installation lay buried beneath what had once been a quiet farming community. Similar scenes were playing out at sites across the globe as humans volunteered for a process that would kill most of them. Ann Porter stood in line with her teenage daughter Emma, both of them carrying the simple belongings they had brought from their home in Denver. Around them, families said goodbye to each other with the quiet dignity that had become common in recent days. Everyone understood the mathematics of what they were attempting. Perhaps 1 in 10,000 would survive the activation process with their consciousness intact and enhanced. The rest would die as their brains burned out from dimensional energies they couldn't process. "Mom, we don't have to do this," Emma said for the 100th time since they had begun the journey. "We could go to one of the underground shelters. Maybe the government will find another way." Anne squeezed her daughter's hand and looked ahead to where the activation chamber had been constructed around the buried architect site. The device looked like a fusion of alien crystal and human engineering, built according to specifications provided by the Guardian Construct. Teams of volunteers had worked around the clock to complete similar installations at every active archaeological site on Earth. "There is no other way, sweetie," Anne said gently. "If we don't try this, the reclaimers will take our minds anyway. At least this way, some of us might survive to fight back." The decision had been made not by governments or scientists, but by ordinary people like Anne who had understood what was at stake. When the global broadcast had explained humanity's situation and the terrible choice they faced, The response had been immediate and overwhelming. Millions of humans had simply begun traveling to the nearest activation sites, driven by the same stubborn determination that had carried their species through ice ages and natural disasters. The activation process was surprisingly simple from the outside. Volunteers entered a chamber lined with crystalline growths that had emerged from the buried architect technology. The crystals would scan their genetic structure, looking for the dormant sequences that made architect interface possible. For most, the process would end there. Their bodies would simply shut down as their neurology proved incompatible with the dimensional stresses involved. But for the few who survived, the change was extraordinary. They emerged from the activation chambers with expanded consciousness that allowed them to perceive and manipulate reality in ways that rivaled the architects themselves. These enhanced humans could see through multiple dimensions simultaneously, manipulate energy at the quantum level, and interface directly with technology based on principles that normal human science couldn't understand. Anne watched as batch after batch of volunteers entered the chambers. Most never came out. Their bodies would be found hours later, peaceful but lifeless, as if they had simply decided to stop existing. The few who survived emerged changed, their eyes holding depths that seemed to contain galaxies. Dr. Sarah Kim was one of the first successful activations at the Nebraska site. She had been a theoretical physicist before volunteering, but when she emerged from the crystalline chamber, she was something far beyond human understanding. She could manipulate the fabric of space-time with conscious thought, bending dimensions, like a child folding paper. "The process is working," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that made nearby electronics resonate in sympathy. "Each successful activation makes the next one slightly more likely. We're building a network of enhanced consciousness that can support those who come after." When Anne's turn finally came, she kissed Emma goodbye and walked into the chamber. With the calm acceptance that had characterized humanity's response to the crisis, the crystalline walls began to glow as the architect technology scanned her genetic structure, looking for the dormant sequences that would allow her consciousness to expand into higher dimensions. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Anne felt her awareness being stretched across multiple planes of existence simultaneously, her mind trying to process information from dimensions that had no names in human language. For endless moments that might have been seconds or centuries, she existed in a state between life and death, her consciousness deciding whether to expand or simply cease. She thought of Emma waiting outside. She thought of the reclaimer fleet approaching Earth. She thought of the billions of humans who were depending on the few who could survive this process. And somehow, through sheer determination, she held on. When Anne emerged from the chamber 6 hours later, Emma barely recognized her mother. Anne's physical form was unchanged, but her presence had become something vast and complex. She could see the quantum patterns that governed reality, manipulate energy flows that existed across multiple dimensions, and interface with architect technology as if she had been born to use it. "I'm still me," Anne told her crying daughter, though both of them knew it wasn't completely true. "But I'm also more than I was, and I can help protect what we're fighting for." The first test of humanity's enhanced defenders came sooner than expected. A reclaimer scout force arrived while the activation process was still ongoing at sites around the world. The alien vessels materialized in Earth's atmosphere without warning, their impossible geometry casting shadows that seemed to bend light itself. The enhanced humans responded immediately. Dr. Sarah, Kim, and 50 other survivors from various activation sites linked their consciousness together, creating a collective mind that could match the reclaimer's multidimensional awareness. What followed was a battle fought across multiple planes of existence simultaneously, with weapons that existed as much in thought as in physical reality, and found herself part of the fighting without conscious decision. Her enhanced awareness allowed her to see the reclaimer attacks as they moved through dimensions, energy patterns that could strip consciousness from matter with surgical precision. But she could also see how to deflect those attacks, turning the reclaimer's own weapons against them through manipulations of space-time that her Enhanced Mind understood instinctively. The battle lasted only minutes in normal time, but felt like hours to the enhanced humans fighting it. When it ended, the Reclaimer scouts were retreating, their vessels damaged by weapons they couldn't understand or defend against. For the first time since the galactic harvest had begun, a Reclaimer force had been defeated. News of humanity's victory spread through the surviving Federation networks faster than light-speed communication should have allowed. Species that had been reduced to empty shells by the Reclaimer harvest suddenly began transmitting desperate messages to Earth. The Alterans, whose crystal cities had been stripped of consciousness, begged for human assistance in restoring their people. The remnants of the Hive Collective, operating on pure instinct without their queen's guidance, sent mechanical distress signals asking for help. Ambassador David Walsh, now serving as humanity's emergency coordinator, found himself in the unprecedented position of receiving surrender offers from civilizations that had recently mocked human weakness. The irony was not lost on him as he responded to each plea with the same message. Humanity would help, but only after Earth's own survival was secured. The enhanced humans worked with increasing coordination as more survivors emerged from activation sites around the world. They discovered that their abilities could be shared through technological interfaces, allowing normal humans to perceive and manipulate architect technology through enhanced intermediaries. This created hybrid teams that combined human adaptability with enhanced perception, proving devastatingly effective against Reclaimer forces, and found herself leading one such team, her enhanced abilities allowing her to coordinate between normal human intuition and multidimensional combat requirements. Emma, despite being unenhanced, proved valuable as a tactical coordinator whose normal human thinking patterns often found solutions that enhanced minds. Focused on multidimensional complexities, missed entirely, the Reclaimers adapted quickly to humanity's resistance, sending larger forces with more sophisticated harvesting technology. But each battle taught the enhanced humans more about their enemies' capabilities and limitations. The Reclaimers, for all their power, were constrained by programming millions of years old. They couldn't adapt or innovate as quickly as their human opponents, who seemed to find new ways to use architect technology with each engagement. As the war intensified, humanity's role in the galaxy was completely transformed. The species that had been classified as minor powers just months earlier was now the only effective resistance against an enemy that had casually defeated galactic civilization. The enhanced humans operated from mobile bases, using modified architect technology to stay ahead of Reclaimer forces while rescuing survivors from harvested worlds. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity's persistence, the trait that had been mocked as their only distinguishing characteristic, became the foundation of their success. Where other species had specialized abilities that could be countered or overwhelmed, humans had adaptability that let them find new solutions to every challenge the Reclaimers presented. But the war was far from over. Deep space sensors detected the approach of the main Reclaimer fleet, a force thousands of times larger than the scouts humanity had defeated. The real test of human evolution was still to come, and it would take place not in the empty spaces between stars, but at the very heart of architect civilization itself. The galaxy's heart was not a place that existed in normal spacetime. It was a construct of impossible size and complexity, built by the architects when the universe was young and their power was absolute. The core facility stretched across dimensions that had no names, its crystalline spires reaching through realities that normal matter could never touch. And at its center lay the consciousness engine, the machine the Reclaimers had built to process every harvested mind in the galaxy. Dr. Maria Santos floated in the modified human spacecraft as it approached the facility, her enhanced perception allowing her to see the structure's true scale. What appeared to sensors as a moon-sized crystal was actually a construction that spanned multiple universes, its foundations rooted in the quantum foam that underlied all existence. Around her, the strike team prepared for what everyone understood would be either humanity's greatest victory or final defeat. The team represented everything humanity had become in the months since the activation process began. Enhanced humans like Maria could perceive and manipulate multidimensional reality with ease. Their consciousness expanded beyond anything their species had imagined possible. Normal humans like pilot Tom Bradley retained the intuitive thinking and adaptability that had carried their species through countless challenges. Working together, they had proven capable of feats that surpassed even architect technology. "Approach vector locked in," Tom announced from the pilot's chair, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "The facility's defenses are scanning us, but they don't seem to recognize our ship's configuration as a threat." That was the advantage of human adaptability. Where other species built technology according to rigid design principles, humans had learned to modify architect systems in ways their original creators had never intended. The strike ship was part human engineering and part captured reclaimer technology, held together by enhanced human consciousness and powered by principles that existed at the intersection of multiple realities. The infiltration had taken months to plan. Enhanced humans working with the Guardian construct had mapped the facility's structure across multiple dimensions, identifying weak points where human adaptability might succeed where architect logic would fail. The mission required unprecedented cooperation between enhanced and baseline humans, as the facility could only be navigated by combining multidimensional perception with human intuition and creativity. "Breach point identified," Maria announced, her enhanced consciousness reaching through the facility's outer defenses to find the vulnerability they had been seeking. "There's a maintenance conduit that exists partially outside the main structure. The reclaimers never considered that someone might approach from angles that don't exist in normal space." The ship phase shifted through dimensions that made Tom's normal human vision blur with impossible colors. But his hands remained steady on the controls, guided by instincts that had been refined through dozens of similar missions. Where enhanced humans could see the path, baseline humans could navigate it with the adaptability that had made their species unique among the galaxy's children. Inside the facility, the scale of the Reclaimer's operation became horrifyingly clear. Massive processing centers stretched across crystalline halls, each one containing the harvested consciousness of entire worlds. The Lumina's energy-based awareness had been compressed into geometric patterns that pulsed with dying light. The Hive Collective's billions of minds were stored in organic matrices that twitched with the memory of thought. Even the mechanical synthetics had been reduced to processing cores that computed endlessly without purpose or understanding. "This isn't just harvesting," whispered Ann Porter, her enhanced perception translating the facility's operations into concepts baseline humans could understand. "They're trying to reverse engineer consciousness itself? They want to understand how awareness emerges from matter so they can control it completely." The team moved through the facility's corridors with practiced coordination, enhanced humans, clearing the path while baseline humans handled the unpredictable situations that arose when different realities intersected. They encountered reclaimer security systems that operated on principles millions of years more advanced than human technology. But human adaptability found ways to confuse or bypass defenses that had never been designed to face opponents who thought outside established parameters. At the facility's core, they found the consciousness engine in all its terrible glory. The machine was beautiful in the way that black holes were beautiful, its perfection simultaneously attractive and utterly destructive. Streams of harvested awareness flowed into its central processing chamber where they were being analyzed, categorized, and ultimately consumed by intelligences that sought to become the sole source of consciousness in the universe. "The process is almost complete," reported Emma Porter, reading data from terminals that baseline human intuition could interpret better than enhanced perception. "They've processed 90% of the harvested minds. Once they reach full completion, they'll have the knowledge to create and control consciousness at will. Every thinking being in the galaxy will exist only by their permission." Maria studied the engine's structure with her enhanced awareness, looking for a way to reverse the harvesting process. A Guardian construct had theorized that reversal was possible, but the energy requirements would be enormous. More importantly, The reversal process would require someone to interface directly with the engine's core systems, a task that would burn out any single consciousness, even an enhanced 1. There has to be a way, Tom said, his baseline human determination refusing to accept defeat even in the face of impossible odds. We didn't come this far just to watch the galaxy die. That was when Maria realized the solution had been there. All along, hidden in the very trait that had brought humanity this far. Individual consciousness might not be powerful enough to reverse the engine's work, but humanity had never relied solely on individual effort. They succeeded through cooperation, through combining their individual capabilities into something greater than the sum of its parts. We linked together, Maria announced, her enhanced perception already beginning to map the connections that would be necessary. Not just enhanced humans, but all of us. We create a collective consciousness powerful enough to reverse the harvesting. While maintaining enough individual diversity to survive the process, the plan was insane by any rational measure. Linking enhanced and baseline human consciousness through architect technology had never been attempted on the scale they were proposing. The psychic feedback could destroy their minds even if the engine didn't. But the alternative was the death of consciousness itself, and humanity had never been willing to accept unacceptable alternatives. The connection formed slowly, carefully, with enhanced humans serving as conduits between baseline human awareness and the multidimensional technology they needed to access. Maria felt her consciousness expand to include Tom's practical determination, Anne's protective instincts, Emma's innovative thinking, and dozens of other human minds linked through the ship's communication systems back to Earth. What emerged was something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective consciousness that retained individual identity while achieving collective capability. The linked human minds could perceive and manipulate reality at levels that surpassed even the architects, but they remained fundamentally human in their adaptability and determination to protect what they valued. The battle for control of the consciousness engine took place in dimensions where thought and reality intersected directly. The Reclaimers fought back with the fury of beings who had never been challenged, their ancient programming demanding the complete domination of all consciousness. But human determination proved stronger than architect logic, human adaptability, more flexible than million-year-old algorithms. The reversal process began with a sound that existed in minds rather than air, a harmony of consciousness returning to bodies that had been empty for months. Across the galaxy, harvested beings began to wake from nightmares of non-existence. The luminous energy patterns blazed back to life. The Hive Collective's queens felt their connections to their people restored. Even the synthetics processing cores resumed their logical evaluations of reality. But the victory came at enormous cost. The energy required to reverse the harvesting burned through the linked human consciousness like fire through paper. Maria felt her individual awareness fragmenting, merging permanently with the restored galactic consciousness. Tom's practical determination became part of the universal will to survive. Anne's protective instincts spread across worlds she would never see. Emma's innovation became inspiration for species she had never met. Most of the strike team died in the process, their individual consciousness sacrificed to restore awareness to billions of beings across the galaxy. But their sacrifice carried meaning beyond mere survival. The restored consciousness bore traces of human determination, human adaptability, human refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy that emerged from the Reclaimers' harvest was subtly but permanently changed by contact with human awareness. The Reclaimers themselves, faced with the complete collapse of their grand design and the impossibility of recreating it, withdrew to whatever dimension they had inhabited before their return. Their departure was not defeat in any military sense, but the recognition that consciousness had evolved beyond their ability to control or contain it. In the aftermath, Ambassador David Walsh found himself addressing the reformed Galactic Federation from council chambers rebuilt by species that now understood the true meaning of cooperation. The civilizations that had mocked humanity's limitations were gone, replaced by beings who carried traces of human consciousness within their own awareness. "We refuse any special status," Walsh announced to the assembled representatives, his words carrying the weight of human sacrifice and human determination. "We didn't save the galaxy to rule it. We propose a new federation based not on power, rankings, but on mutual cooperation, with humanity serving as mediators between species that now share something of our perspective." The galaxy that emerged from the crisis was fundamentally different from the one that had dismissed humanity as a minor power. Species that had specialized in single capabilities now understood the value of adaptability. Civilizations that had pursued perfection now embraced the creative chaos that came from cooperative diversity. Human colonies spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors but as teachers, showing other species how to combine individual capability with collective purpose. Enhanced humans worked alongside baseline humans and alien partners to explore the expanded possibilities that there merged. Consciousness had created. The ancient archaeological sites on Earth became academies where representatives from dozens of species learned to think in ways that transcended their original limitations. The final image was one of hope realized through sacrifice accepted. Human children played alongside alien youngsters in integrated colonies throughout the galaxy, their games creating new forms of art and thought that would have been impossible before the consciousness merger. The species that had been mocked for their unreasonable persistence had used that very trait to create a future where persistence itself was no longer necessary, because cooperation had made all things possible. The galaxy had learned that true power came not from individual superiority, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others, to adapt when adaptation seemed impossible, and to never accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. In the end, humanity's greatest strength had been their greatest weakness transformed. Their refusal to give up had become the foundation for a galactic civilization that would never need to give up again.